The first distress signal came from the mining station on Titan 7. The message was short and filled with static. Something big, destroying everything. Can't stop it. Then nothing but silence. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair on the bridge of the Earth defense ship Valiant. He had been patrolling the outer sectors for 3 months without seeing any real action. Space pirates were about the worst thing they usually dealt with out here. But this message made his blood run cold. "Sir, we're getting more signals," his communications officer said. Lieutenant Amy Cole had been working the radio all morning. Her face was pale as she listened to her headset. "Station after station is going dark. Something is moving through the Centauri system." Jake stood up and walked to the main screen. The star map showed dozens of red dots where colonies and outposts had gone silent in the past 6 hours. Whatever was out there was moving fast and leaving nothing but destruction behind. "Set course for the nearest station that's still talking," Jake ordered, "and send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we have a situation." 3 hours later, they arrived at Centauri Station 5. What they found there would haunt Jake for the rest of his life. The massive space station was torn in half like someone had ripped apart a tin can. Metal debris floated everywhere. Some pieces were still glowing hot from whatever had destroyed them. "Any survivors?" Jake asked. "Scanning now, sir," replied his science officer, Dr. Nick Barnes. "I'm picking up life signs in the emergency shelters. Looks like about 200 people made it to safety." They spent the next hour rescuing survivors from the wreckage. The stories they told were all the same. A massive creature had appeared without warning. It was bigger than anything they had ever seen. Black as space itself, with claws that could cut through steel like paper. Energy weapons bounced off its hide like raindrops. "It didn't kill everyone," one survivor told Jake. Her name was Linda Murphy, and she had been the station commander. "That's the strange part. It destroyed all, our weapons and our ships, but it let most of the civilians live, like it was only interested in our military stuff." Back on Earth, Admiral Lisa Carter was having the worst day of her career. Reports were flooding in from all over the galaxy. The creature that survivors were calling the Warbeast had hit 7 star systems in the past 12 hours. Every military installation was destroyed. Every warship that tried to fight it was torn apart. "What are we dealing with here?" she asked the room full of officers and scientists. "How big is this thing?" Dr. Peter Hamilton stepped forward. He was Earth's top expert on alien life forms. He had been studying the scattered reports and video footage for hours. What he had learned scared him more than anything in his 30-year career. "Based on eyewitness accounts and the damage patterns, we're looking at something nearly 200 feet long," he said. "It moves through space without any visible propulsion system. Its skin appears to be some kind of organic armor that can deflect particle beams and plasma fire." He pressed a button and a blurry image appeared on the main screen. It showed a dark shape moving against the stars. The creature looked like a cross between a dragon and a shark, with massive claws and a head full of teeth. "The most disturbing part is its behavior," Dr. Hamilton continued. "This isn't a mindless beast, it's learning from each encounter. The first few battles lasted hours. Now it's destroying entire fleets in minutes." Admiral Carter felt a chill run down her spine. "How many ships have we lost?" 732, including Allied vessels, came the grim reply from Commander Ryan Scott. "And that's just in the past day." On the peaceful farming world of New Kansas, life went on as normal. The planet was far from the main shipping lanes and had never seen a military ship. Most people didn't even know there was trouble in other parts of the galaxy. Katie Brooks was 8 years old and lived on her family's farm with her parents Dan and Mary. She spent most of her days taking care of animals. They had horses, cows, pigs, chickens, and a dozen other types of farm animals. Katie loved them all, but her favorite was an old dog named Rex. "Come on, Rex," Katie called as she filled the water troughs. "Help me feed the chickens." The old border collie wagged his tail and followed her to the chicken coop. Rex was getting slow in his old age, but he still tried to help with the farm work. Katie scratched behind his ears as they walked. Her father Dan was fixing a fence near the barn. He looked up and smiled when he saw his daughter. Katie had always been good with animals. She seemed to understand them in a way that amazed him. Even the wildest horse would calm down when Katie was around. "Katie, your mother wants you to come in for lunch," Dan called. "Just a minute, Dad," Katie replied. "I need to check on the new calf." In the barn, a young cow had given birth 3 days ago. The calf was healthy but still wobbly on its legs. Katie knelt down next to it and gently petted its head. The mother cow watched, but didn't seem worried. All the animals on the farm trusted Katie completely. Meanwhile, in the capital city of New Geneva, Planetary Governor Bill Johnson was reading his morning reports. Most of them were about crop yields and weather patterns. New Kansas was a quiet world where the biggest news was usually about the county fair. That changed when his secretary rushed into his office. Helen Garcia looked worried as she handed him a communication pad. "Sir, we just received this from Earth Command. It's marked urgent." Bill read the message twice before it sank in. There was some kind of monster attacking colonies throughout the galaxy. Earth was asking all worlds to prepare their defenses and report anything unusual. "Have we seen any strange ships or signals?" he asked Helen. "No, sir, nothing at all. It's been quiet as always." Bill looked out his window at the peaceful farmland stretching to the horizon. It was hard to imagine that somewhere out there, entire fleets were being destroyed by a creature from nightmares. Back in space, Captain Morrison's ship had joined a growing fleet near the Arcturus system. Ships from a dozen different worlds had gathered to make a stand against the Warbeast. It was the largest military force ever assembled. "Any word on when this thing will get here?" Jake asked Admiral Carter over the communication link. "Our scouts report it's moving this way," she replied. "Should arrive in about 6 hours." Jake looked around at his crew. They were good people, but none of them had ever faced anything like this. He thought about his wife and kids back on Earth. If they couldn't stop this creature here, it would keep moving toward the heart of human space. Dr. Hamilton was still studying every piece of data they had about the Warbeast. Something about its behavior pattern bothered him, but he couldn't put his finger on what it was. The creature seemed to follow some kind of logic, but he couldn't figure out what that logic was. "It's not random," he muttered to himself as he stared at the star charts. "There's a pattern here, I just need to find it." The pattern would have to wait. Long-range sensors were picking up something massive moving toward their position. The Warbeast was coming, and in a few hours they would learn if humanity's weapons could succeed where so many others had failed. On New Kansas, Katie finished her chores and went inside for dinner. She had no idea that her simple, peaceful life was about to collide with the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. Dr. Peter Hamilton couldn't sleep. He had been staring at data files for 18 hours straight, trying to understand what they were fighting. Coffee cups littered his desk at the Lunar Research Station, and his eyes burned from looking at screens. But something in the old records was calling to him. The research station orbited the moon and held the largest collection of alien artifacts in human space. Most of the items came from dead civilizations that had been found on distant worlds. Hamilton had access to files that few people even knew existed. "Computer, search for any references to large biomechanical creatures in the Archive 7 files," he said. The computer hummed for several minutes. Archive 7 contained records from civilizations that had died out millions of years ago. Most of the text had been translated by computer programs, but the translations were often unclear. Search complete. Found 47 references. Displaying. Most relevant matches. Hamilton leaned forward as ancient text appeared on his screen. The first document was from a world called Zephyr Prime. The translation was rough, but he could make out the important parts. The final guardian awakens when threats appear. Created by the master builders to protect the great empire. None can stand against its power. His hands shook as he opened the next file. This one was from a different world, but the story was similar. The Warbeast comes in the dark times. The architects made it to destroy those who would challenge their rule. Hamilton sat back in his chair. The architects. He had heard that name before in other ancient records. They were supposed to be a race that had ruled much of the galaxy long ago, but all traces of them had vanished millions of years before humans had even discovered fire. He typed in a new search. "Computer, Find all references to the architects. This time, the computer took even longer. When the results came up, Hamilton felt his blood turn cold. Hundreds of different worlds had records about the architects. They had been a powerful race that controlled star systems across the galaxy. According to the records, they had created many biomechanical weapons to maintain their empire. But the most interesting part was how their empire had ended. It hadn't been destroyed by war or invasion. The architects had died from some kind of plague that they couldn't cure. Their empire had collapsed overnight, leaving their creations behind. "The Guardian remains," read one record. "Even after the Masters fell to the Red Death, their final creation continues its endless duty." Hamilton picked up his communication device and called Admiral Carter. It was 3 a.m. Earth time, but this couldn't wait. "Admiral, I think I know what we're dealing with," he said when she answered. "It's not just some random monster, it's a weapon. A very old weapon that's still following orders from masters who died millions of years ago." 2 hours later, Hamilton was on a transport ship heading for the ruins of Kepler 442b. The planet had been discovered 20 years ago and was known to have once been home to an advanced civilization. But no one had ever connected it to the architects until now. Commander Ryan Scott met him at the landing site. Scott was a tough military man who specialized in exploring dangerous alien ruins. His team had been called in when the regular research crews couldn't handle what they found. "Doc, this place gives me the creeps," Scott said as they walked toward the ancient city. "My scanners are picking up energy sources that shouldn't exist. Some of this technology is still active after millions of years." The city was unlike anything Hamilton had ever seen. Tall crystal towers reached toward the sky, and some of them still glowed with inner light. The streets were perfectly preserved, as if the inhabitants had just disappeared yesterday. "Where are the bodies?" Hamilton asked. "That's the weird part," Scott replied. "We haven't found any. No bones, no graves, nothing. It's like they all just vanished." They made their way to the center of the city, where the largest tower stood. The building was made of some kind of crystal that seemed to shift color as they looked at it. Strange symbols covered its surface. "My translator is working on those symbols," Scott said. "So far, it's managed to decode about 30%. From what we can tell, this was some kind of command center. Inside the tower, they found rooms filled with advanced technology. Most of it was beyond human understanding, but some devices still responded to touch. When Hamilton placed his hand on one crystal panel, the room filled with holographic images. The holograms showed the history of the architects. They had been tall, thin beings with 4 arms and large heads. Hamilton watched in amazement as the images showed their rise to power across the galaxy. They had been brilliant scientists and engineers who created incredible machines. But then the images changed. They showed the architects working frantically on some kind of project. Hamilton realized he was watching the creation of the Warbeast. The hologram showed the creature being grown in massive biotanks. The architects had used genetic material from dozens of different species to create their ultimate weapon. Hamilton saw DNA patterns from creatures he recognized and many he didn't. "My God," he whispered. "They used Earth animals in the design." Scott looked at him with surprise. "Earth animals? How is that possible? Humans hadn't even left Earth when this thing was built." Hamilton pointed at the hologram. "Look at those genetic patterns. I can see wolf DNA, bear DNA, even some kind of big cat. The architects must have visited Earth millions of years ago and taken samples." The hologram continued, showing the Warbeast being programmed with its mission. It was designed to seek out and destroy any species that might threaten the architects' empire. The creature would follow this programming forever, never stopping until all threats were eliminated. But then something went wrong. The final images showed architect cities being abandoned. The tall beings were dying from some kind of disease that turned their blood red. In desperation, they activated their final weapon and sent it out to protect an empire that was already collapsing. "The plague killed them all," Hamilton said. "But they activated the Warbeast before they died. It's been wandering the galaxy ever since, following its last orders." Scott studied the images. "So it thinks it's still protecting them Architect Empire? Exactly. And to its programming, any advanced military force looks like a threat that needs to be destroyed. They spent the next several hours downloading everything they could from the crystal computers. The information they found would change everything humans knew about galactic history. But it also confirmed Hamilton's worst fears about what they were fighting. Back on Earth, Admiral Carter was preparing for the largest space battle in human history. Every available ship was being called to the Sol system. The Warbeast was moving toward Earth, and they would make their final stand at humanity's homeworld. Captain Morrison's ship was among the hundreds gathering near Mars. The sight of so many warships in one place should have been inspiring, but Jake felt only dread. He had seen what this creature could do to entire fleets. "Sir, incoming transmission from Dr. Hamilton," his communications officer reported. Hamilton's face appeared on the main screen. He looked exhausted but excited. "Captain, I have important information about the creature. It's not just some monster. It's a biomechanical weapon created by an ancient race called the Architects." Jake listened as Hamilton explained what they had discovered on Kepler 442b. The news was both fascinating and terrifying. They weren't just fighting a beast. They were fighting a weapon designed by one of the most advanced civilizations in galactic history. "The important thing to understand is its programming," Hamilton continued. "It sees any organized military force as a threat to its creator's empire. That's why it's been destroying fleets but leaving civilians alone." "So, how do we stop it?" Jake asked. Hamilton paused before answering. "I'm not sure we can, but I think I might know why it's heading, for Earth specifically. The Architects used genetic material from Earth animals when they created it. There might be something about Earth that calls to it." On New Kansas, Katie Brooks was playing with Rex in the backyard. Her parents were inside watching the news about the strange attacks happening in other parts of the galaxy. But Katie didn't understand what all the worry was about. Her world was still peaceful and safe. She threw a stick for Rex to fetch, but the old dog just looked at her with tired eyes. Instead of running after the stick, Rex walked over and put his head on Katie's lap. He seemed nervous about something. "What's wrong, boy?" Katie asked, scratching behind his ears. Rex whined softly and looked up at the sky. Katie followed his gaze but saw only stars beginning to appear in the evening light. She didn't know that. Her simple farm was about to become the center of the most important event in galactic history. The Warbeast was coming, and for reasons no one yet understood, it was heading straight for her. The first lookout spotted the Warbeast when it was still 3 hours away from Earth. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the long-range sensors. The creature appeared as a dark dot moving against the stars, but that dot was growing larger by the minute. "All ships, this is Admiral Carter," came the voice over the communication system. "The target is approaching. Remember, we protect Earth at all costs. This is humanity's last stand." Jake looked around at his crew. They were scared but ready to fight. His weapons officer, Lieutenant Ben Clark, was checking the plasma cannons for the 10th time. His pilot, Ensign Carol West, kept her hand steady on the controls despite the fear in her eyes. "Sir, the creature is bigger than we thought," reported Dr. Barnes from his science station. "My instruments show it's nearly 300 feet long, and it's moving faster than anything that size should be able to move." Through the main window, they could now see the Warbeast with their own eyes. It looked like a nightmare made real. Its black skin seemed to absorb light, making it hard to focus on. Massive claws extended from its front limbs, each one longer than a fighter ship. Its head was filled with teeth that could crush a building. "All ships, attack formation, Admiral," Carter ordered. "Fire at will." The space around Earth lit up as hundreds of ships opened fire at once. Plasma beams, laser cannons, and missile strikes hit the creature from every direction. For a moment, Jake thought they might actually hurt it, but the Warbeast didn't even slow down. The energy weapons bounced off its hide like water. The missiles exploded harmlessly against its armored skin. The creature swept one massive claw through space and destroyed 6 ships in a single motion. "It's not working," Jake said into his radio. "Nothing is getting through." The battle became a slaughter. The Warbeast moved through the human fleet like a shark through a school of fish. Ships exploded all around it, but the creature seemed to know exactly where each attack was coming from. It dodged the larger weapons and ignored the smaller ones. Jake watched in horror as the battleship Titan fired its main cannon directly at the creature's head. The blast was powerful enough to destroy a small moon, but the Warbeast simply opened its mouth and seemed to swallow the energy beam. Then it reached out with one claw and tore the huge ship in half. "All ships, fall back to defensive positions, around Earth," Admiral Carter ordered. Her voice was tight with stress. "We need to regroup." But the Warbeast wasn't interested in chasing the retreating ships. Instead, it turned toward Earth itself. Jake realized with growing terror that the creature was heading for the planet's surface. "It's going to land," he reported. "All ships intercept course. We can't let it reach the surface." The remaining human ships threw themselves at the creature in a desperate attempt to stop it, but it was too late. The Warbeast broke through Earth's atmosphere like a falling star, leaving a trail of fire behind it. On the surface, people in major cities looked up at the sky in fear. Emergency sirens wailed as governments ordered evacuations. But the creature wasn't heading for New York or London or Tokyo. Instead, it was flying toward the farming regions of the American Midwest. At Earth Defense Command, Admiral Carter was trying to coordinate the evacuation of Earth's population. Millions of people were fleeing the cities, but there wasn't enough time to get everyone to safety. "Where is it going?" she asked Dr. Hamilton, who had returned from his mission to study the ancient ruins. Hamilton was watching the creature's flight path on a computer screen. His face was pale with worry. "It's heading for the rural areas. Specifically, it looks like it's going toward New Kansas." "New Kansas? Why would it go there? There's nothing on that planet but farms." "I don't know," Hamilton admitted. "But something is calling it there. This isn't random behavior." On New Kansas, Governor Bill Johnson was trying to organize an evacuation of his entire planet. But New Kansas was a farming world with people spread out over thousands of miles. Most families lived on isolated farms with no quick way to reach the spaceports. "How much time do we have?" he asked his assistant Helen Garcia. "Maybe 6 hours before it reaches our atmosphere," she replied. "But sir, most of our people can't reach the evacuation ships in time." Johnson looked out his window at the peaceful farmland. In a few hours, this quiet world might become a battlefield. He thought about all the families with children who had never seen violence in their lives. Dan Brooks was loading his family's truck when the evacuation order came through on the radio. His wife Mary was gathering important papers, while Katie was in the barn saying goodbye to the animals. "Katie, we have to go now," Dan called. "But what about Rex and the other animals?" Katie asked. She was holding the old dog in her arms and tears were running down her face. "We'll come back for them," Dan promised, though he wasn't sure if that was true. "Right now we need to get you somewhere safe." Katie reluctantly put Rex down and climbed into the truck, but as they drove away from the farm, she kept looking back at the animals they were leaving behind. Rex was standing in the yard watching them go with sad eyes. They had only driven for 20 minutes when their truck broke down. Black smoke poured from the engine, and Dan couldn't get it started again. They were still 50 miles from the nearest spaceport. "We'll have to walk," Dan said. But he knew they would never make it in time. Mary held Katie close as they started walking down the empty road. Other families were in the same situation. The roads were filled with broken down vehicles and people trying to reach safety on foot. Above them, the sky began to change color. Something was coming through the atmosphere, something so large that it blocked out the sun. Katie looked up and saw fire streaking across the sky. "What is that, Mom?" she asked. Mary didn't know how to explain that a monster from space was coming to their world. "It's going to be okay, honey," she said, though she didn't believe it herself. The Warbeast hit the ground with the force of a meteor. The impact created a crater 5 miles wide and sent shockwaves that could be felt hundreds of miles away. Trees were flattened for miles around the landing site. The creature had landed less than 30 miles from Katie's family farm. In space, Captain Morrison watched the impact through his ship's cameras. The explosion was visible from orbit, a bright flash that lit up an entire continent. "My God," he whispered. It's down. Admiral Carter's voice came over the radio. All ships, maintain distance. Do not approach the landing site until we know what it's doing. The Warbeast slowly rose from the crater it had created. Dirt and rocks fell from its massive body as it stood up to its full height. For a moment it just stood there, its huge head turning from side to side as if it was looking for something. Then it began to move. But instead of heading toward cities or military bases, it walked toward the farming areas. Its massive feet left craters with each step, but it moved with surprising care, as if it was trying not to cause unnecessary damage. Dr. Hamilton was watching from the command ship. It's searching for something specific, he told Admiral Carter. Look at its behavior. This isn't random destruction, it's hunting. Hunting for what? I don't know. But whatever it wants, it thinks it's going to find it in those farming communities. Katie and her family had taken shelter in an abandoned barn when the creature landed. The building shook from the impact, and dust fell from the ceiling. Through the gaps in the walls, they could see other families hiding wherever they could find cover. Stay quiet, Dan whispered to his daughter. Don't make any noise. But Katie wasn't thinking about staying quiet. She was thinking about Rex and all the animals back at their farm. She wondered if they were scared and if anyone was taking care of them. As the ground shook with each step of the approaching creature, Katie made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. She quietly slipped away from her parents and began walking back toward her farm. She had to make sure her animals were safe, even if it meant facing the monster that had everyone so frightened. Katie had never been afraid of large animals before, and she wasn't going to start now. Behind her, the Warbeast continued its slow march across the countryside, getting closer to the Brooks family farm with each massive step. Katie walked through the empty fields toward her family's farm. Behind her, she could hear her parents calling her name, but she didn't stop. Every step the Warbeast took made the ground shake, and she could see trees falling in the distance. But Katie wasn't thinking about the monster. She was thinking about Rex and the other animals who were probably scared and alone. The Warbeast stood in its crater like a mountain made of darkness. Its massive head moved slowly from side to side, and its glowing eyes scanned the landscape. For the first time since it had begun its campaign of destruction, the creature seemed uncertain about something. Dr. Hamilton watched from the command ship overhead. He had been studying the creature's behavior for hours, and something was different now. It's not moving like it did before, he told Admiral Carter. Look at its body language. Body language? The Admiral asked. It's a monster, not a person. No, wait. I think I see what he means, said Captain Morrison, who was watching through his ship's cameras. It's moving like it's searching for something, like a hunting animal following a scent. Hamilton felt a chill run down his spine. That's exactly what it's doing. The genetic programming from Earth animals is still active in its brain. It's using hunting behaviors that are millions of years old. The Warbeast took another step toward the farming area. Its foot came down on an empty house, crushing it completely. But the creature barely seemed to notice. Its attention was focused on something else entirely. In the military command center, General Patricia Stone was coordinating ground forces. Thousands of soldiers had surrounded the area where the creature had landed, but they were keeping their distance. Every weapon they had tried in space had failed, and she didn't expect ground-based attacks to work any better. "What are your orders, General?" asked Colonel Mark Davis, who was leading the troops closest to the creature. "Hold position and observe," she replied. "Do not engage unless it moves toward populated areas." But the creature wasn't moving toward cities or towns. It was walking slowly through farmland, and with each step it seemed to become more focused on a specific direction. Katie reached her family's farm just as the sun was setting. The place looked empty and sad without her parents there. But as she walked toward the barn, she heard familiar sounds. Rex barked once when he saw her, and the other animals made noises of greeting. "I knew you'd be here," Katie said, kneeling down to hug the old dog. "Did you miss me?" Rex licked her face and wagged his tail. The other animals crowded around her as if they had been waiting for her to come back. The horses nickered softly, and the cows mooed in their gentle way. Katie looked around at all the animals depending on her. "Don't worry," she told them. "I won't leave you again." She spent the next hour making sure all the animals had food and water. The work helped calm her nerves, even though she could feel the ground shaking with each step of the approaching creature. Katie had grown up around animals, and she had learned that staying calm was the most important thing when something scary was happening. 5 miles away, the Warbeast stopped walking. Its massive head turned directly toward the Brooks farm, and for the first time since landing, it seemed to know exactly where it wanted to go. Dr. Hamilton saw the change immediately. "It's locked onto something," he reported to Admiral Carter. "Whatever it was searching for, I think it found it." The creature began moving again, but now its steps were more purposeful. It was no longer hunting randomly. It had found its target. In the command bunker, Admiral Carter was trying to understand what was happening. "There's nothing special about that area. It's just farms and small towns. Why would it go there?" "Maybe that's the point," Hamilton said. "Remember, this creature was programmed to destroy threats to the Architect Empire. What if it doesn't see farmers as threats? Then what is it looking for?" Hamilton pulled up a map of the area on his computer screen. "Let me check something." He typed in search commands and studied the results. There's only one farm in the creature's direct path. The Brooks family farm. Captain Morrison had been listening to the conversation. "Do we know anything about this family?" "Just basic information," Hamilton replied. "Daniel and Mary Brooks, both farmers. One daughter, 8 years old. No military connections, no advanced technology. Just a normal farming family." But something was bothering Hamilton. He had spent years studying animal behavior, and the Warbeast's actions reminded him of something. The way it had stopped and focused on one location was exactly how a hunting animal behaved when it found the scent of its prey. "Admiral, I need to ask you something," Hamilton said. "Are there any humans still in that area? The evacuation was ordered hours ago. Everyone should be gone by now." But even as she said it, Admiral Carter was getting reports that worried her. Many families in the rural areas hadn't been able to reach the evacuation ships in time. Some were still hiding in barns and basements, hoping the creature would pass them by. Katie finished feeding the animals and sat down in the barn with Rex beside her. The old dog seemed nervous, but he stayed close to her. Through the open barn door, she could see strange lights in the sky where the spaceships were watching from orbit. "What do you think is out there, Rex?" she asked, scratching behind his ears. Rex whined softly and looked toward the horizon. In the distance, Katie could see something moving between the hills. It looked like a mountain that was walking, but that was impossible. The Warbeast was now only 2 miles from the farm. Each step brought it closer to whatever it was seeking. Military observers watched in horror as the creature passed by other farms without stopping. It seemed to know exactly where it was going. Dr. Hamilton was frantically checking his data when he made a discovery that changed everything. "Admiral, I just found something in the evacuation records. The Brooks family never made it to the evacuation point. Their truck broke down 20 miles from their farm." "So they're safe then, away from the creature's path." "That's what I thought. But I just checked the family information again. They have an 8-year-old daughter named Katie, and according to school records, she's known for her way with animals. Won the county fair 3 years running for her work with farm animals." Admiral Carter felt her blood turn cold. "You think the creature is drawn to her?" "I think it's possible. The creature has Earth animal DNA in its genetic structure." "What if it can sense someone who has a natural connection with animals?" On the ground, Katie heard a sound that made her look up from petting Rex. It was a deep rumbling noise, like thunder that never stopped. The barn walls shook and dust fell from the ceiling. "What was that?" she asked Rex. The dog stood up and walked to the barn door. His ears were back and his tail was down, the way he looked when he was really worried about something. Katie followed him to the door and looked outside. At first, she couldn't understand what she was seeing. There was something huge moving in the darkness between the hills. It was taller than the trees and blacker than the night sky. As it got closer, Katie could make out the shape of a massive head with glowing eyes. "Oh," she said quietly. It's really big. Rex pressed against her leg and whined. The other animals in the barn were making nervous noises. The horses were snorting and stamping their feet. The cows were mooing in distress, but Katie wasn't afraid. She had been around scared animals her whole life, and she knew how to stay calm when they were upset. The creature was certainly bigger than anything she had ever seen, but it was still just an animal that seemed to be looking for something. "Easy, everyone," she said to the animals in the barn. "Let's just stay calm and see what it wants." The Warbeast took another step toward the farm. It was close enough now that Katie could see the details of its massive body. Its skin looked like black armor, and its claws were longer than her father's truck. But what caught her attention were its eyes. They were large and intelligent, and they seemed to be looking directly at her. The creature stopped walking. For the first time in its long, destructive journey across the galaxy, the Warbeast had found what it was looking for. The Warbeast stood at the edge of the Brooks farm like a living mountain, its massive head lowered toward the barn where Katie waited with her animals. Each breath from the creature sent waves of heat across the farmyard. In the barn, the horses whinnied and the cows moved restlessly, but they didn't run away. Katie's calm presence kept them from panicking. Dr. Hamilton watched from the command ship, his heart pounding. "All ships do not fire," he said into his radio. "I repeat, do not fire. Something is happening down there." Admiral Carter wanted to order an attack, but she held back. The creature hadn't destroyed anything since landing. It had walked past dozens of farms and buildings without harming them. Now it was just standing there looking at a little girl and her animals. Katie stepped out of the barn slowly. Rex followed close behind her, though the old dog was shaking with fear. The other animals stayed in the barn, but they watched through the doorway. "Hello," Katie said in her normal voice. She wasn't shouting or whispering. She spoke the same way she talked to any new animal she met. The Warbeast's huge eyes focused on her. Katie had never seen eyes that large before, but she could see intelligence in them. More than intelligence. She could see confusion and something that looked like pain. The creature lowered its head even more until it was only 50 feet above Katie. This close, she could see that its skin wasn't perfectly smooth. There were scars and marks all over its body, like it had been fighting for a very long time. "You look tired," Katie said. "Have you been traveling for a long time?" The Warbeast made a sound deep in its throat. It wasn't a roar or a growl. It sounded almost like a whine, the noise a dog makes when it's confused or hurt. Katie recognized that sound. She had heard it from animals that had been lost or abandoned. Rex had made the same noise when her family first found him as a stray. "Puppy? You don't know where you're supposed to be, do you?" she asked. In space, Captain Morrison was watching the scene through his ship's cameras. "Is she talking to it?" he asked in amazement. "She's treating it like any other animal," Dr. Hamilton replied. "And look at its body language. It's responding to her." The Warbeast was indeed responding. Its massive head tilted to one side, the way a confused dog might tilt its head. The aggressive posture it had maintained for so long was slowly changing. Katie took a step closer. "It's okay," she said. "I know you're big and scary to most people, but I'm not afraid of you. You're just lost, aren't you?" The creature made that whining sound again, louder this time. Its front legs, which had destroyed entire battleships, lowered until it was almost lying down in front of the little girl. Katie could see that the creature was trying to make itself smaller. It was the same behavior she had seen in large dogs when they wanted to show they weren't dangerous. Even though the Warbeast was still enormous, it was doing its best not to seem threatening. "Good," Katie said. "That's much better." She walked closer until she was standing right in front of the creature's massive head. Its eyes were each bigger than her entire body, but Katie looked into them without fear. "You've been fighting for a long time, haven't you?" she said. "Someone told you to protect something, and you've been trying to do your job ever since." The Warbeast blinked slowly. In its ancient mind, genetic memories that had been sleeping for millions of years were waking up. It remembered a time before the fighting, before the endless mission to destroy threats. It remembered what it felt like to have a purpose that wasn't about destruction. Katie could see the change in the creature's eyes. The wild, dangerous look was fading, replaced by something gentler. She had seen the same change in wild horses when they finally learned to trust humans. "The people who gave you your job are gone," Katie said softly. "They've been gone for a very long time. You don't have to keep fighting anymore." Above them, Dr. Hamilton was frantically taking notes. "This is incredible," he said to Admiral Carter. "The creature's stress indicators are dropping. Its aggressive behaviors are completely gone." "How is that possible?" the Admiral asked. "She's communicating with it the same way humans have communicated with animals for thousands of years, through body language, tone of voice, and genuine understanding." The Warbeast lowered its head until it was almost touching the ground. Katie reached out and placed her small hand on its nose. The skin felt warm and rough, like the hide of a very old elephant. "You're not a weapon," she told the creature. "You're just an animal that got lost and couldn't find its way home." For the first time in millions of years, the Warbeast felt something other than the drive to destroy. The genetic programming that had controlled it for so long was being overridden by older, deeper instincts. Instincts that remembered what it meant to be cared for and understood. Rex, who had been hiding behind Katie, slowly walked forward. The old dog was still scared, but he could sense that the dangerous moment had passed. He sniffed at the creature's massive claw, then looked up at Katie and wagged his tail. "See?" Katie said. "Rex thinks you're okay too." The Warbeast watched, the small dog with fascination. It had destroyed millions of fighting ships, but it had never seen anything as small and harmless as Rex. The creature's ancient programming had no response for something that posed no threat at all. Katie noticed that the creature was holding its body in a tense, uncomfortable position. It reminded her of the way Rex looked when he was trying to be good but didn't know what was expected of him. "You know what you need?" Katie said. "You need to learn how to relax." She looked at the creature's posture and recognized the problem. It was standing the way an anxious dog stands when it doesn't know what to do. Katie had worked with many animals that had the same problem. "You're all wound up and ready to fight," she said. "But there's nobody here to fight, so you can just sit down and rest." The Warbeast looked confused. For millions of years it had known only two states, searching for threats and destroying them. The concept of rest was foreign to its programming. Katie could see that the creature didn't understand what she meant, so she did what she always did with confused animals. She showed them what she wanted. "Sit," she said in the firm but gentle voice she used to train animals. It was the same voice she had used to teach Rex how to behave, and the horses how to calm down when they were excited. The effect was immediate and extraordinary. The genetic memories buried deep in the Warbeast's brain suddenly blazed to life. Those ancient Earth animals whose DNA had been used in its creation had known this command. They had been bred and trained by humans for thousands of generations to respond to this simple word. The massive creature slowly lowered its hindquarters to the ground. The motion sent tremors through the earth, but the Warbeast was careful not to damage anything nearby. For the first time since its creation, the ultimate weapon was sitting peacefully. Katie smiled and reached up to pat the creature's nose again. "Good," she said. "That's very good." In space, the entire human fleet watched in amazement as the most dangerous creature in galactic history sat obediently in front of an 8-year-old girl. "The threat indicators are gone," Dr. Hamilton reported. "It's not reading as hostile anymore." Admiral Carter could hardly believe what she was seeing. How did she do that? "She reminded it what it used to be before it became a weapon," Hamilton replied. "Before the architects turned it into a destroyer, it was just an animal, and animals remember kindness." Katie looked up at the Warbeast's massive head. "You can stay here if you want," she said. "We have lots of room, and I think you'd like the other animals." The creature made a soft rumbling sound that almost seemed like purring. For the first time in millions of years, the Warbeast was at peace. News of what happened spread across the galaxy within hours. The creature that had terrorized entire civilizations had been tamed by a human child with nothing but patience and understanding. Other species began to understand that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their weapons or their technology. It was their ability to see the soul inside even the most fearsome creature and offer it the one thing it had never known: a home. Katie visited the Warbeast every day, bringing it treats and teaching it new commands. The creature learned quickly, eager to please the small human who had given it something more valuable than victory: peace. And in the quiet moments when Katie sat beside the massive creature, reading books while it listened with ancient, patient eyes, the galaxy remembered that sometimes the greatest battles are won not with weapons, but with whispered words of kindness.